you get involved in this effort, and what kind of spurred you on in terms of getting this act together to help protect minors from the effects of the cannabis economy?
Well, I'm 53 years old, and I've seen the war on drugs over the last, since the 1970s, and it's just been bad for kids. The fact that we don't allow adults to transact with each other means that anyone can transact with anyone, and often adults turn to children.
No, I don't.
The author of our initiative actually has two elementary school children, one which will be entering junior high school this year. And he and I have both worked. We met working on the Sensible of Washington initiatives to legalize marijuana, but we didn't make it. And he wants this out of the schools before they get there.
And Don, as far as the initiative 1223, you're going to be gathering signatures between now and July 6th. That's when you have the deadline to get it on the ballot. You're planning on being all over the state with this as well?
Yes, there's actually a ground base work, grassroots effort. A lot of activists have been working on this for a couple of years, and you may be aware of Initiative 502 that actually qualified to the ballot this year. And that's going to be pretty bad on families and kids, and we wanted to give them a calmer, more reasonable alternative.
How does this differ from that initiative? I mean, obviously that was for legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes and for, recreational use.
Yeah, Initiative 502 would allow you to sell it through state stores, state licensed stores, but it would have a prohibitive tax and not allow home grow. That's only going to encourage the black market economy to raise their prices. We feel that by allowing home growing for adults only, that's going to really eliminate the black market. We do limit home growing to 400 square feet, or about a 20 by 20 plot. And all these little plots would become the source of legal cannabis for adults in Washington state. When adults are free to transact with other adults without penalty, but their felony penalties would remain for transacting with children, there'd be no reason for an adult to involve a child in cannabis economy, and that would help us get it out of schools.
And Dennis, give us a recap.
And of course, as far as the Cannabis Child Protection Act, Don Skakie, of course, on the live line with us here this morning about the initiative that they've undertaken here.
Don, either way, are we ready to legalize marijuana, whether it's going to be sold at state-sponsored stores or between adults? Are we ready for that?
Well, I think we are. I mean, when you look at the news, you see drunk driving reports, but I look at the news every day, and I don't find cannabis only. I see over-the-counter drugs involved in those kind of incidents, alcohol, and not so much cannabis. So it seems that adults are using cannabis responsibly now. As far as the medical end goes, we've got a situation in eastern Washington where the access that patients had has been cut off, and now they're literally forced to drive hundreds of miles to western Washington to obtain their medicine. The fact is that most kids in school can go and obtain cannabis in less than a half an hour. So something's wrong with this model when it's easier for an authorized patient under state law to get or harder for that patient than it is for a kid in school.
Yeah, I can see that point, but are we seriously ready to have a state-sponsored store selling marijuana?
Well, our initiative wouldn't call for a state-sponsored store.
No, the 502 would.
502 would, and people that have looked at that have determined that that is where it's going to be conflicted with federal law. You cannot create a law that conflicts with federal law regarding cannabis. Our initiative removes the penalties for adults, maintains the felonies for adults transacting with kids, and keeps kids from graduating into adulthood with felonies for marijuana on their records. So while this thing is all tied up in court with 502, we should be legal in Washington.
Don, if even if it is approved, this initiative, the 1223 is approved by the voters out there, aren't you still butting up against what is federal law, or how would this change that situation?
Well, there's an argument there, too, that due to the 10th Amendment, this is actually a states' rights issue. We address this further by we actually prohibit our state and local law enforcement for cooperating with the federal government on issues that would no longer be a Washington state crime under this law. We do not prohibit them from dealing with the federal government regarding importation from Canada or other states, and we don't allow interstate commerce of cannabis. So this does not conflict with federal law.
One of the things that has been talked about is the parents' ability to guide their children in the exposure for spiritual and social use of cannabis, like at ceremonies and family celebrations. What would change there with your proposed law?
Well, our law actually is modeled on the way that we deal with alcohol and minor use in the law in Washington state today. We've merely taken what is applicable with alcohol and move that over for marijuana. You know, kids go out and experiment in the world. For instance, in drinking. You know, parents that raise their kids responsibly and guide their use regarding alcohol up into adulthood have less problems than those families that ignore the issue and the kids go out and experiment with their friends.
And maybe to clarify this, let's say if you're you're under the age of 21, and obviously with alcohol, you're not allowed to have it in your possession. If you're under 21, under this proposal, you would still be this would be against the law for a youngster to have it if they're not of age.
That's correct, unless it was under the supervision of their parents, or if they were employed. If you're over 18 and employed, then under the supervision of someone 21 years or older, the same as alcohol is now.
All right. Well, I always thought that even if you were had a parental permission and you were caught drinking, especially in public, that would be a source of a penalty as well.
Well, it's in your parents' presence as well,
and
as a minor.
And when you drew this up, this proposed initiative 1223, Don, was it your feeling that 502 is just not going to do it as far as getting marijuana out of the gray area legally?
Well, the problems with 502 that we would love to have supported 502, but the 5 nanogram limit for DUI has no basis in science. There's great concern there. It's going to cause a lot more problems, both for the public and law enforcement, when there's actually no impairment. We don't want to be on the road with anyone that's impaired by any substance at any time. But if you're not impaired, people go home and grab a beer on the way home, and they drive home. Now, that's only had one beer, so they're not impaired. But they do have alcohol in their system. But they do have alcohol in their system. It's the same with cannabis. But unfortunately, if people consume cannabis the night before and get up in the morning and go drive, they can often have amounts higher than what the limit is for DUID. We're going to be putting people out of work. We're going to be putting them in jail. We're going to be costing them a lot of money. We're going to be taking parents away from their kids and the economic benefits of that away as well. I'd hate to see a situation where, because somebody responsibly uses cannabis, they lose their job, go to jail, their parent, their mate, has to get a second job, and then we end up with latchkey kids. We want to solve the problem, not create more.
One of the things, too, now, you mentioned the legal implications here. Part of the thrust of this particular initiative is that we need to uncrowd our overcrowded jails in Washington State, people that are busted for marijuana possession.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's over 14,000 people a year incarcerated in Washington State simply for cannabis. That's a lot of room in the jails for people that we can't seem to find room for now. We seem to be letting out murderers and rapists and all kinds of people that harm the community. For the most part, cannabis consumers are your neighbors, your friends. They hold down jobs. They're responsible people. They pay their bills and taxes. Do we really want these people in jail?
It's interesting. Now, have you taken a look at the tax implications in your initiative versus 502?
We haven't had analyticals done on it, but I can tell you that, most people that are casual consumers will spend some money on this every week. The old Dave's not here concept. Well, when you take all those $40 bills and replace them with the ability to grow your own at home, that means that money is now spent in the legitimate economy in the community. It's no longer being spent on cannabis that possibly might go to the cartels. This is money that will now go to buying shoes for the kids, put gas in the car, or maybe even save for retirement.
Talking with Don Skakie, of course, he's helping to initiate this Cannabis Child Protection Act, and in some respects, shouldn't you probably rename this? Let's protect those who do use recreational marijuana, period,
Well, no, because the intent of the proposal is to protect children from the effects of the cannabis economy. The effect of allowing, we do allow adults under this proposal to transact freely with other adults. And, when a medical patient that's currently forced to drive hundreds of miles now can transact with any adults, you're not putting them in a position of, people that use medical cannabis, their families look at them suffer. And if I was a high school student or a junior high school student and I saw somebody that was in severe pain, driving for hours and hours and suffering the detriments of that, I might feel that it might be helpful to get them something from school. And that's absolutely what we want to avoid. We want open access for patients, open access for adults, and focus our enforcement efforts on keeping it away from kids.
Don, one of the other things, too, and I noticed that sometimes people have confused this with the Yes on 514 organization. Tell us a little bit about that. What's the big difference between the two groups?
Well, there is no difference, and I'm glad you mentioned that. 1223 is an initiative to the people, and 514 is an initiative to the legislature. We have put this issue before the people a couple of times, and either through organizational failure or other effects, we haven't got it there. We have until July 6th to collect on 1223, and we have until January 3rd to collect on 514. So if we can collect all the signatures now for both initiatives, we'll be both on the ballot in November and before the legislature in January. Now, some people think that because when there's two issues of similar style on the ballot, in this case 502 and 1223, that they become a spoiler to each other. Well, if that's the fact, that'll be unfortunate. We feel that if the people of Washington State have an opportunity to look at both presentations, they'll just have to decide for themselves what they want legalization of marijuana to look like in Washington State. So if that in fact happens and both are spoiled, we'll be before the legislature in January with the same proposal. Hopefully they'll see the sense of it. And if not, we'll likely be voting on it the following November.
And how are the people from Initiative 502 reacting to your particular proposal?
Honestly, I don't really follow their campaign. I've seen their stuff on Facebook. They seem to delete a lot of comments that they don't want to answer questions about. We're happy to answer any questions. They seem to be focused on their campaign, and they should be focused on their campaign going into November. But they're going to have a real problem when they find out, when the public find out what the alternative is and what's going to be more detrimental or beneficial to their family.
So what is the process right now for your initiative, and when do you hope to perhaps file it?
Well, we just released the petition sheets yesterday. We are signing both of them, one in one hand and one in the other, so we get all of our signatures at once. If we qualify by July 6th, then the petitions go to the Secretary of State. They check them and make sure that we have enough signatures, and then they advance it to the ballot.
And where do you plan on gathering most of your signatures? On the west side?
Well, we started out on the west side because this is where the largest population base is. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you there's support for legalization throughout Washington State. We have a vast network of individuals that are becoming involved, and they are your friends and neighbors. You'll see them out there. If you look for the big sign that says "Sign here to legalize," with a big leaf on it. It's an eye catcher, so that we want you to know where we are. But we're all over the state. We're getting petitions out this week. As next week, I'll be coming over to the east side. I've got meetings in Spokane, and we'll be setting up with other meetings with other activists.
All right, talking this morning with Don Skakie, of course, with the Cannabis Child Protection Act. And if folks want more information on the text of the initiative itself, Don, they can go to cannabischildprotectionact.org. And it speaks about the whole issue itself. Thank you, Don, for joining us here this morning. Here.
Sure. I just want to say the initiative is written to speak to the uninformed public, the people that really don't know the cannabis issue well. We've done that because the first 6 pages lay out where we are, where we've been, and why we're doing this. And the following pages are the law. Everything that's written in the law relates back to what was said in the beginning, and that is to guide the courts and the legislature as they interpret this law going forward. Please do give it a read.
Don,
see how it will affect you and your family.
Don, thank you for joining us again here.
It's coming up on 8:59. ABC News next on KONA.